In the small, forgettable town of Ridgewood, people didn't disappear. They grew old, they moved away, or they died quietly. That's why the night Daniel Moore vanished still clung to the town like a stain no one could scrub out. Daniel was ordinary in every visible way. 32 years old. Married. No children. A quiet accountant who left for work at 7:10 a.m. and returned home by 6 p.m. every weekday. He waved at neighbors. Paid his bills. Never raised his voice. If someone were to design a man meant to fade into the background, Daniel Moore would have been the blueprint. And then one Tuesday night, he didn't come home. At first, no one panicked. His wife, Laura, assumed traffic or overtime. By midnight, her phone calls went unanswered. By morning, his car was still missing. By evening, the police were knocking at her door. The investigation began with routines and checklists. His office confirmed Daniel had left at his usual time. No arguments. No strange behavior. His bank accounts were untouched. His phone last pinged near a gas station 5 miles from town, then went dark forever. They found his car 3 days later, parked neatly behind an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Ridgewood. The keys were gone. There was no sign of a struggle. No blood. No fingerprints that didn't belong. It was as if Daniel had parked, stepped out, and dissolved into the air. The media came and went. Volunteers searched the woods. Divers checked the river. Psychics made promises they couldn't keep. Weeks turned into months, and months hardened into years. Eventually, Daniel Moore became a photo on a corkboard, then a box in an evidence room, then a name spoken only when people talked about that strange case from years ago. Laura waited longer than anyone expected. 5 years before she stopped setting 2 plates at dinner. 7 before she sold the house. By the 10th year, even she had accepted the word everyone else had quietly chosen long ago. Gone. Ridgewood moved on, until a single camera remembered what everyone else had forgotten. The camera belonged to a convenience store called Eagle Mart, just off Highway 6. It wasn't special. Grainy footage. Slightly crooked angle. The kind of system no one ever looked at unless something went wrong. One rainy night, the store owner, Harold Finch, was reviewing old footage after a string of minor thefts. He scrolled back weeks, then months, annoyed at the flicker and static. When the screen jumped to a timestamp from nearly a year earlier, he was about to fast forward, until something about the figure on the screen made his hand freeze. A man entered the store at 2:17 a.m. He wore a hooded jacket pulled low. His posture was tense, cautious. He avoided the camera instinctively, like someone who knew exactly where it was. Harold leaned closer to the monitor. The man's face tilted upward for just half a second. Harold felt a sudden pressure in his chest. He'd lived in Ridgewood his entire life. He knew faces. He knew that face. It was older, thinner. The hairline had receded. But the eyes, there was no mistaking them. Daniel Moore. Harold watched the clip again. And again. The man bought nothing. He stood near the back for less than a minute, then left. No license plate visible. No clear direction. Harold didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he walked straight into the police station with a USB drive in his shaking hand. At first, the officers were skeptical. Missing person cases didn't suddenly resurrect themselves after 10 years. But as the footage played, the room fell silent. A detective paused the frame, zoomed in, enhanced what little the camera allowed. The resemblance was undeniable. The case was reopened within hours. Laura was called in. She hadn't been inside a police station in years. When the video played, she covered her mouth, tears spilling before she could stop them. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Daniel." Hope is a dangerous thing when it's been dead for so long. Investigators traced the footage timeline and discovered something unsettling. The man resembling Daniel had appeared on multiple cameras over the years: bus terminals, street intersections, ATM lobbies. Always late at night. Always avoiding clear angles. Always moving. He wasn't hiding. He was surviving. Records showed a man using the name Michael Reed, no birth certificate, no history before 10 years ago. cash-only jobs, short-term rentals, no close relationships, no social media, no digital footprint. Someone who knew how to erase himself. When police ran facial comparisons, the match probability climbed higher with each pass. This wasn't coincidence. Daniel Moore was alive. But the deeper they dug, the darker the questions became. Why disappear so completely? Why abandon everything? His wife, his life, his name. And why stay so close yet so unreachable? Then came the detail no one was prepared for. Financial records revealed that 2 weeks before Daniel vanished, he had withdrawn a large sum of money, far more than his salary could reasonably explain. The source wasn't listed as income. It wasn't a loan. It was a transfer from an account that didn't officially exist. An account linked to an ongoing investigation that had never been made public. Suddenly, Daniel Moore wasn't just a missing person. He was a man connected to something buried deep enough that even the police had missed it for a decade. As detectives prepared to track down Michael Reed, another piece of footage surfaced, this one from a traffic camera just outside Ridgewood. The timestamp was recent. The man stood at a crosswalk, rain soaking his jacket. He looked directly into the camera this time. No hood, no effort to hide. And for the first time in 10 years, Daniel Moore smiled. Not with relief, not with fear, but with the calm expression of someone who knew he was finally being watched, and wanted it that way. The smile haunted the investigators long after the footage ended. It wasn't the smile of a man relieved to be found. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting, as if Daniel Moore, now living as Michael Reed, had finally decided the game had gone on long enough. Within hours, the task force shifted from where is he to what did he do. The account that funded Daniel's disappearance became the center of everything. It led to a shell company buried beneath layers of false registrations, all connected to a private financial firm that had collapsed quietly a decade earlier. Officially, the firm went under due to irregular accounting practices. Unofficially, it was suspected of laundering money for organized crime. Suspected, but never proven. Daniel Moore had worked as an external auditor on one of their files. At the time, he had told colleagues it was routine. A dull contract. Nothing memorable. But the numbers told a different story now. Daniel hadn't just found discrepancies. He had uncovered a system designed to hide millions, possibly billions, moving through ghost accounts. Someone had noticed. 2 days before he vanished, Daniel had met with a federal investigator. The meeting had never been logged. The investigator, now retired, remembered Daniel clearly. Nervous, pale, certain that if he spoke publicly, he wouldn't live to see the end of the week. Daniel had been given a choice. Disappear or die. The money transfer wasn't a reward. It was protection. A one-time payment to vanish quietly, change his identity, and never contact anyone from his former life again, including Laura. The revelation broke her in ways grief never had. Daniel hadn't been taken. He had chosen to leave. To let her believe he was dead. To let her mourn a man who was still breathing. But the investigators knew something else now too. Deals like that came with conditions. And conditions always expired. When police tracked Michael Reed's last known location, they found a rented room above a shuttered bar. Inside was a single mattress, a burner phone, and a wall covered in newspaper clippings. Old articles about financial crimes. Court cases that never went anywhere. Names crossed out in red ink. Daniel hadn't been hiding. He had been watching. The burner phone rang for the first time in months, while officers stood in the room. They answered it on speaker. Daniel's voice was calm, steady. "I was wondering when you'd catch up." He didn't deny who he was. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He spoke as if this moment had been rehearsed for years. "They're almost done cleaning it up," he said. "And once they are, I'm next." He explained everything. The people behind the laundering network had been quietly eliminating loose ends. Witnesses died in accidents. Whistleblowers vanished overseas. The protection Daniel was promised was never meant to last forever. The smile at the traffic camera hadn't been arrogance. It had been resignation. Daniel had deliberately stepped into view because he knew time was running out. If he disappeared again, no one would look for him. But if the world remembered Daniel Moore, if cameras watched him, if police followed him, then killing him would become inconvenient. Visibility was his last shield. The call ended with coordinates. An old train yard miles outside Ridgewood. By the time police arrived, night had swallowed the place whole. Rusted tracks stretched into darkness. Fog rolled low along the ground. And in the center of it all stood Daniel. No hood, no disguise. He didn't run. He raised his hands calmly and waited. In custody, Daniel told them where the rest of the evidence was hidden: drives, documents, account keys scattered across the country. Enough to dismantle what remained of the operation. Enough to put powerful people behind bars. But there was something else he hadn't told them yet. Hours later, while Daniel sat in a holding room, a fire erupted in a downtown evidence storage facility. Supposedly electrical. Conveniently timed. Several key items from the reopened investigation were destroyed. The message was clear. Daniel was still in danger. The decision came quickly and quietly. Officially, Daniel Moore would never exist again. No trial. No press conference. No public reunion. The truth would be sealed, classified, buried deeper than before. The world would never know how close it had come to seeing what moved beneath its systems. Laura was given one final meeting. Daniel stood behind reinforced glass, older than she remembered, thinner than she dreamed. He apologized, but words felt useless now. Some wounds didn't close just because the truth finally arrived. "I did what I had to," he said softly. Laura didn't forgive him. She didn't curse him either. She simply nodded, turned away, and walked out of his life for the second and final time. By morning, Daniel Moore was officially declared deceased again. This time, permanently. His fingerprints were erased. His face scrubbed from databases. His name locked behind clearances few would ever receive. Michael Reed disappeared too. The investigation concluded with quiet arrests months later. Financial giants collapsed. Names vanished from headlines almost as quickly as they appeared. The system corrected itself just enough to survive. And the cameras? They never caught Daniel again. Years later, a new convenience store opened on Highway 6. New cameras, clearer footage, higher resolution. One night, a man passed by the glass doors without entering. He paused, glanced up, and for a fraction of a second, the lens caught his face. Older still, calmer, free. The footage was automatically overwritten 48 hours later. And just like that, the man who disappeared for 10 years vanished once more. Not because he was hiding, but because the truth had finally served its purpose.